So we want to get stuck into some 3D printing. Now, the first thing we need to do is slice our files. So how do we do this? Well, we need a program which is a slicing software. The one we use is from Ultimaker and it's called Ultimaker Cura. So you need to download this, and we download it from ultimaker.com. So we go to that website, go along to software, go click on Ultimaker Cura, and this is the software that we are going to need. Get the latest version, which is the one here, download for free. Choose your platform that you work from, so we're working from Windows. Wait for the file to download. It'll just take a few seconds. Click through some of these windows. Yep, we're happy with that. License agreement, where you want it. Cura. Okay, just click through. Leave this as standard. It opens STL files with Cura. You could do OBJ files as well, but we'll just leave it as standard. And just need to wait a minute or two to let that extract and download. Okay, so we are fully downloaded and set up. Now let's run software. So have some little welcome screens. Let's get started. Just have to click through these usual boxes, improvements. You can set up a Ultimaker account if you want to. We're going to skip that for now. So our printers are not going to be over the network, so we need to add a non-networked printer. So click that and we have the Ultimaker S5 model. So that's the first one that's highlighted there, so that's fine. Don't worry about the printer name. So that's the machine we're using. So we'll click through next. And there's a few screens here that just gives you some updates on what's new. You can have a little read of those if you want and click through to the links. Just some release notes, usual stuff. Don't worry about the firmware, that's something that I install on the 3D printers. Okay, so here is our basic interface. This is the bed of the machine, a representation of it. So scroll, mouse button will scroll in and out, right mouse button, you can change your viewpoint. Okay, so let's have a look. The first thing we're going to do is actually import a file. So we can come from this folder or we can go for file. So let's have a look at opening a file. So find a file, whichever one you want to download. You might have downloaded something from Thingiverse, you might have got somebody design a file for you, or you might have drawn something up yourself. So we're going to bring in a little character here. Okay, so this imports your file. There's a little box down the left hand side which gives us some options. We need to click on the item that we've got there. You can see it's kind of facing the wrong way, so what we can do is turn him around. So we go to rotate. Now you can reset, you can lay it flat, and you can set the face aligned to the build plate. So we obviously want it on the bottom, so we're going to leave it as he is, but he's kind of facing the wrong way. One of the easiest ways I find is if you just hover near the blue circle, this obviously takes him around that way. You can take him doing a side flip, or you can even do a back flip if you want, but click on that blue circle and we can spin him around, and that's spinning around 90 degrees. I think we need to go a little bit more, so there we go, that's a bit better, isn't it? He's looking at us now. Okay, so again, click on the item, what we want to manipulate. So we can move him across the bed as well if you want several items on there, and you can move him by freeform. So whatever you want to do, tend to stick to the middle really, it's usually the best. You can also scale as well. This is quite handy if the scale is not important and you might have a print that doesn't quite fit on the 3D printer, and you can just scale it down so it fits. We're going to stick to 100%. And if you don't have uniform scaling selected, then it will just scale up or down the axis that you are adjusting. So there you go. He's half as thin, but he's still the same height and depth. So just to be aware of that. So we've done rotate. We've had a little quick look at that. You can mirror character if you want, left-handed, right-handed, backwards and forwards as well. Don't worry too much about some of these other settings, printer support. Don't worry about those in a minute. We'll run through the basics. So one of the main things you're going to need to do for our 3D printers in the lab is have a look up the top here. Now what we've got is a dual extruder machine. So this is the filament that is in extruder 1, and that is the filament which is in extruder 2. Okay, so we have our PLA filament in extruder 1, so this is already highlighted as PLA. If you do have something different like ABS, nylon, PETG or anything else, then you can select it from this drop down menu. So we have PLA, so we're going to stick with that. This is the print core, so this is the little print core where the filament is extruded through. So this is correct, and we have AA 0.4 print core. You can change these as various ones there, but this is important to know that that is our print core. Now print core number 2, again it's got a standard PLA and AA 0.4 print core, but we don't have PLA in this filament, so we need to change this. This is our support material, which is PVA. So click on generic, and we'll have a little look down. Fine, we've got PVA there. Okay, so now it's come up red. So if you do change it and it comes up red and you're not quite sure, it has a different print core for this material. So we have to adjust the settings for this, and the print core for this is a BB 0.4. So then you see it goes back to normal. Now that's really important. It won't print properly if you don't get these two extruders set up. A little thing to be wary of: if you do have this set up and you're happy with it and you're printing quite well, and you update the Ultimaker software, it will reset these print cores and these materials. Okay, so you will have to go back in and just double check that they're correct. Okay, so next what we have here, top right hand side, we've got some print settings. So these are the basics of printing, and let's have a little look through what we've got. So we've got some different profiles here. So one of the things you can adjust is the fidelity of your 3D prints. So this could be whether you want a really high quality print, so you would want more layers in a thinner resin being extruded, so you can go right down to 0.06 with this machine. Standard generic setting is 0.2 for me. When you start getting back down to 0.1, you get into quite high quality 3D print. So obviously depending on what you're wanting the print for. This kind of automatically, these are automatic kind of settings, will set everything up, so it sets visual, takes it to 0.06. So I tend to just like to have control and set it myself. 0.2 is pretty standard. Okay, so let's actually have a look at what these layer heights look like in the flesh. So let's start with a fine setting. So this is a 0.1 millimeters. If I can zoom in there, you can see that's quite fine layers. But from the top, there's a few steps you can see. Now that particular print has taken 2 hours 15 minutes, and we go to a 0.2 millimeter setting. You can start to see some of those lines are a bit more prominent there, and that's 1 hour 34. And if we look at kind of quite a rough draft setting, this is a 0.5 millimeter step, and you can see that's taken 58 minutes, and you can see it's pretty rough. You wouldn't want to use that for a finished presentation model. You wouldn't want to be filling and sanding that. So there's a quick look at the different layer heights, how long they take and what they look like. So from 0.1 millimeters to 0.5 millimeters, it's probably about 3 times as long. So another setting we've got is infill. Depending on what you want, how dense you want your print to be, you can change the setting of this. If you want it to be absolutely solid, you can go right up to 100%. You can go down to 50%. It gives you a little indication here. Not quite sure how accurate that is, but I tend to stick with about 10%. That's a pretty standard, unless it has to be really rock solid. Here's a little example of the infill percentages. You can just get a little flavour of what they look like on the inside. Okay, so another setting is supports and adhesion. I tend to click through to custom on this. Now here's the list of all the settings here. So we've just had a look, done quality, and we've already set that at 0.2. You can change the wall thickness. So what's quite handy here, it gives you a little explanation of what it does. So again, that's down to you how strong you want the print to be. Wall thickness, happy to leave that at 1 millimeter. That's the only real sort of kind of consideration we need to look at there. Don't worry too much about top and bottom. I tend to leave those for standard prints, but if you want a particularly thick top or bottom, then you can adjust that. So here you go for infill. There's a 10% we put on, and you can change the pattern if you want, triangles, lines and grids. I tend to just leave it at triangles. Leave the temperatures as it is. We run pretty standard materials, so if there is a specific material that you're going to bring in or want to use, there could be a difference in printing temperature, but we'll leave that as is. Speed, don't worry about that. That's 35 millimeters per second. We're kind of happy with those settings. Travel, don't worry about these things as well. Keep those ticked. Cooling as well. Don't have to worry too much about those settings. Now, something we do want to have a little look at is generate supports. So what we can do is change the support structure of what we're printing. This all depends on what you're printing, whether it's a highly complex part with lots of overhangs. So as you can see with these individual models here, the differing levels of support. So you can see no supports in this model here, and you can see where there's a little bit of the printer's failed around the back because it obviously needed to be supported around there. Okay, touching the build plate, so this will only print supports where it needs it from the point down to the build plate, so it won't do any overhangs that are kind of intermeshed with the actual piece, and you can kind of see it there on his chin there. It hasn't done any because it doesn't touch the build plate, and everywhere it does what it says on the tin. Anywhere there is a bit of an overhang, it will produce support material. Now it depends from model to model which one you want to use. So sometimes if you want to make sure that everything prints as it should, you might want to use everywhere if you want to make sure it's nothing goes wrong. It can be a little bit overkill, but that's your options with supports. So if we tick that, and it gives us these options. Now what we want to make sure when we're doing the support material, that it is from extruder number 2, because if you remember, we have set that up for PVA. Now the PVA material is dissolvable, so this material that's on these 3D prints will need to be put into a bucket of water or in a sink, and they will quite simply dissolve, and it's quite safe to put that down the sink. So we make sure the extruder 2 is selected, the purple one there. You can change the overhang angle as well, what it prints to. 45 might be a little bit overkill. We could go to something like 60 degrees. Here is a little sample of overhang test, and you can see going right up to 70 degrees. That's just about getting away with it. I sometimes tend to stick to 60% to give good balance between quality and assurance that it will print. So if you want to go back down, right down to 45, it'd be super safe, that's fine. And there's your options there, either touching build plate everywhere. Obviously if you don't want the no supports, you obviously just tick that. So let's just say we're going to go everywhere on this, because we've got some pretty big overhangs where his arm comes out. Okay, so that's support material. Another consideration that we might want to look at is the build plate adhesion. So what's build plate adhesion? So we've got 3 options available to us, well 4 if you include no adhesion, but we have brim, which as you can see here, well let's have a little look at this prints a disc around your model. It doesn't print anything underneath it, but it can help with preventing warping. So one problem you can get with your 3D prints is a warping of the part. So what this does, it prints a little area around it, so hopefully that absorbs any kind of possibilities of your print warping. There's also a skirt, which you can see here. So this is a line printed around the model. It's not connected. It tends to help with making sure that the 3D printer is extruding properly before it actually starts the main print. So it can be quite useful depending on what you want to print. And then you have the biggest one, major one, which is a raft, which will print another large area around your 3D print, but it'll print it underneath as well. So should kind of guarantee that your 3D print is going to stick and it's not going to warp. Obviously be aware that that will add time to your 3D print, so again if you're in a rush you might not want to include that, but then you do face the risk of your print failing if you don't implement any of these kind of backup measures. Okay, so you can see the options there: skirt, brim or raft. Let's look at putting a brim on it. And for this we want to make sure extruder 1 is selected, because this will be the PLA filament that we want to print with that, not the PVA. Now there is another little setting here, enable prime blob. So what this will do, it will kind of prime the 3D printer. It might be that you don't want to put any plate adhesion around it, a brim or a raft, but you want to make sure that the extruder is hits the ground running and prints properly when it starts. And what it does, it goes down to the bottom left corner and it just primes the nozzle and it just extrudes out some of the filament before it goes straight to printing. So we make sure that it prints straight away, because one of the issues if it doesn't start printing it doesn't start extruding perfectly at the start, it can mess up the whole process. Okay, so I sometimes click that. You don't tend to need to use it if you're printing a brim or a raft, but it's just good to know. So we don't need to worry too much about anything else. Dual extrusion, don't worry about those things. So there we go. That is pretty much all of our settings that we need to be concerned about. If you want to get a bit more into it, there's more in-depth videos maybe on YouTube if you want to check it out. So how do we get the file into our 3D printer? So what we need to do is slice our file. So we've got everything there. He's quite happy. We've got a little box down the bottom right hand corner. We will click that and it will start doing its business. It is basically working out the coordinates and the whole plan of how it is going to 3D print this object. Now what it will give you is an estimation, a very accurate estimation of how long this will take, and this particular print will take 7 hours 51 minutes, so you can plan ahead accordingly, and it will also give you an estimation of how much filament will be needed. So if you want to have a little look at how it's actually going to print it, there's a little button that says preview. So if we click that, it's going to process it, and what that gives us is a three-dimensional representation of our model. So main model material is the red and the yellow areas there. It's kind of showing the layers, and the support materials is that in cyan blue colour. So we can see pretty much what it's going to look like. So yeah, once you're happy with it being sliced and you're happy with the time and the amount, we can save it to your removable drive. So have your USB stick, whatever at the ready, save to removable drive, and we will see a little bar come up, and there we go. We are fully saved and our file is now ready to 3D print. So let's go and do it. Okay, so you've got your file all sorted out and you are ready to print. So come along to the lab, and the first thing we want to do with the machine is switch it on. So we want to get around the back and just flick the on switch. The small little LED screen will power up, and there will be some icons on there that will run through and we'll get set up for 3D printing our file. Okay, so this is the main screen of the Ultimaker S5, and we have three symbols down the left hand side. One is for the machine is ready to print. Second one down is regards the machine and the filaments that are in there. As you can see, as we mentioned in setting up the file in Cura, we've got PLA in spool 1 and we've got PVA natural in spool 2. So that's important to have those correctly aligned. Okay. And the third option is for settings, maintenance and network. You shouldn't have to worry about any of those things. Okay, so we are ready to print. Now, the select from USB will only be highlighted when there is a USB stick in the port. Okay, so plug your USB stick in and then it's highlighted blue. What we will do is we will touch that, and this will give us a list of files that are on our USB stick. So we can scroll down, look at the various files, find the file that you want to print quite simply, touch it, and it will just give you a quick overview of the printing file. So it's going to tell you how long it takes. So you've got 8 hours 57 minutes. The material is in PLA, and it'll take 7.2 meters of PLA and PVA natural 3.6. So what we want to do is start the print. Make sure it's the white file and click start. Now the machine will get itself prepared. It will heat up the bed and the extruders. So it's important to make sure the doors are closed on the machine and make sure you don't interfere or open the doors or put your hand or anything else inside the chamber while it's printing. The machine will zero the axis for its 3D printing, and once it's done that, it will commence laying down its first layer. So it's probably a good idea to stay with the machine to make sure the first few passes of the print are laid down properly, just to make sure that it sticks to the bed and the file is running okay. So when you're happy that all is good, you can leave the print, might be overnight or throughout the day, and come back when your time is up. Okay, so implements for removing your 3D prints. We do not want sharp implements like knives and scalpels. We have available some scrapers and some plastic things, so we'll take one of those. And we do have cut gloves available as well if you do think you're going to need them. Okay, so your 3D print is ready to be removed from the Ultimaker. Let's open the doors. Gently get your under and lift it up. Okay, so here we have the final model. Looking really good. If we're going close, we'll be able to see some of the print lines. So we can clean those up later if we want. Looking good. Okay. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you 3D printing soon.